Ali, do hereby solemnly declare that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the people of Guyana. I will faithfully execute the office of President without fear or favor, affection or ill will, and that in the execution of the functions of that office, I will honor, uphold, and preserve the Constitution of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. I do so swear. So help me God.
This is the exact spot where President Ali took the oath of office on August 2, 2020. That day would always be significant, for it marked the end of a 5-month struggle to preserve our democracy and to prevent the subversion of the will of the Guyanese people. Equally significant is that here, the struggles to preserve our freedoms in 2020 culminated and democracy prevailed. To better appreciate that significance, what transpired across the city at the Ashman's building and at the Guyana Elections Commission's compound in Kingston must first be examined. I am now in the Ashman's building that served as the office of the returning officer for Region 4, where on the night of March 2, 2020, the night of the general elections, a routine exercise which should have taken just mere hours saw the manifestation of what seemed an orchestrated plan to prevent the verification of the statements of polls or SOPs for Region 4 in the manner enshrined in the Constitution. That led to the 5-month period it eventually took to have the final declaration of those elections, a period during which there were court cases, false declarations, drama, struggles, and uncertainty. But first, let's understand what should have transpired with regard to the Constitution and the verification of the SOPs.
The statements of poll are not different. They're not different. They have to have the same numbers. If it was 15 SOPs prepared in that polling place, all 15 have to have the same numbers. One can have 10 and one 15. They have the same information. So he calls out those numbers from the SOP. The agents are sitting there, they check what they have, and they say, okay, we agree. So he either puts it on the board or they all put it on their sheet, and the process continues to the end.
Clearly that did not happen. Instead, over time, actions seemed to reveal that plan by the APNU+AFC coalition and its affiliates within the GCOM Secretariat to rig the elections in the presence of local and international observers and the wider world.
Was the bold, brazen, brass-faced attempt.
They must never be trusted again. Never again should we trust the APNU. We should not trust them at all.
They are lying openly. They are telling people things that people know not to be true.
There was an influx of youths as the guardians of democracy.
People around the world watching, and you're attempting to rig an election.
That was on March 5, 3 days after the March 2nd elections. Without completing the verification process, returning officer for Region 4, Claimant Mingo, proceeded to make a declaration for Region 4 that was not in keeping with the Constitution.
They're declaring a win for the APNU without confirming Region 4. This is fraud.
As a matter of fact, some 50% or 400 ballot boxes for Region 4 were not verified when he made the declaration to try and give victory to the APNU+AFC coalition government, thereby subverting the true results and the will of the Guyanese people. To understand the deliberateness of that March 5 declaration, let's rewind to Elections Day and into the verification process.
March 2 was a pretty calm day.
No confusion, smooth and everything.
No mishaps, and the girls in there, they were very attentive.
It was very smooth and quietly.
It's really very peaceful.
The night of E-Day, which was March 2nd, I went over to the Ashman's building to commence the verification process, which statements of polls started coming in from various locations. But because the political parties didn't have all of the statements of polls that GCOM had at that point, which was 11 o'clock in the night, they were all coming in at various times. We decided to start the verification process again at 2 a.m. of the next, well, same night, but the next day, which is March 3rd.
They did a reconciliation between what GCOM said, 10, and what is on your statement of poll, 10. You say 10, we say 10, everybody's happy. Let's log that number on the tabulation sheet.
So the APNU agent had, a polling agent had a statement of poll, the PPPC agent had a statement of poll, and any other small party that was there. And you had the supervisors and so would have the statement of poll. Now, we would get a copy of those statements of poll either by picture, and we also knew that our persons took pictures of it being posted outside of the polling station. So at that point in time, there was nothing to indicate to me that we would experience what we experienced the 5 months thereafter.
That stopped on March 3rd, the evening. Mr. Mingo stopped it, says they were tired or something. They would start back the next day. Peculiarly, just before he stopped it, a PPP rep had asked how long they would take that evening. Would they go through the night? Because Region 4 is the largest, and there's the largest number of statements of polls to verify and go through. And he said, yes, you know the process. We go through the night. And then about an hour later, he says, stop. The difficulty is that we never really started back that process after that. That statement of poll to statement of poll process. That was the last time we had that process. That was March 3rd.
That is when the shenanigans started to happen.
We were scheduled to have commenced our activities as far as the continuation of the verification process for District 4. This morning, the returning officer for District 4, he took ill. He was taken to the hospital. So there was the initial stoppage. We could not have commenced until much later.
And on that Wednesday morning, when you saw Mingo being wheeled out and lifted down that stationary escalator, all of that, and I have my suspicions about it. When you saw Mingo being wheeled out there, that was the plan continuing.
When the clerk to the returning officer was advised to continue the process, the process of verification commenced in earnest at probably 2, I can't recall the exact timing. And during the process, some errors were discerned. We would have completed the first 8 statements, and there were some errors contained in 6 of the 8, for example, statements.
You need to make sure that the count is accurate, more so than to make sure that it's quick.
With the international community present, there has been enough embarrassment that I think the powers that be have agreed to go back to the statement of poll. Let us hope it continues. The more delay we have, the more people will get tired. With the limited resources that the small parties have, they physically cannot have personnel in there policing everything, and this is going to go into tomorrow. This might go into the next day.
They will put up a screen now to see that the information from the statement of poll is properly reflected or inputted, and then when they finish sub-districts like Georgetown, they will print it out, give all with a total, and give it to all the political parties for reconciliation, so they would know if there is any difference in the parties' numbers.
GCOM officials said that he was tired, and he decided to stop the process and go into a room with his computer and flash drive. And the whole idea was that he was tired and he was retiring for the night.
That same night was the night the flash drive kid came into play. And that was when we noted the flash drive got stolen and it went into another room. And when we went into that room, the kid was pretending to be asleep, and we noticed the other, I think it was I'm not sure if it was a janitor or one of the clerks, but I believe one of the clerks was at the side of the printer, and we noticed something being printed, all right? And when we approached him, we got the police involved, and we approached, and we basically found that this flash drive had a lot of different information on it. When we had taken it back out, to cut the long story short, we take the flash drive back out, we got it into the laptop. This was about 2 in the morning. We were all there, about 100+ persons there. Took that flash drive from the kid, plugged it into the computers, and we saw some different figures. So we wanted to know what it was. Then again, at that point, Mr. Lowenfield had arrived. He was there with us talking, and we had to beg him to see the contents of that flash drive and that laptop.
It comes across as intimidation, that you're trying to intimidate the observers when you speak about taking away accreditation.
All right, so I'm just happy that you're here and you're going someplace. Let's live in good spirits. I'm happy to see you for the first time. And just keep on doing what your work. So the last word you're hearing from me is to continue doing your good job.
No, but then it doesn't take away from the fact that you made a threat that you were told to take away accreditation.
No, I'm telling you, Madam, are you listening to me? I'm saying, I told you I wasn't in agreement with that, so please listen to me. I said I wasn't in agreement with you, and just give me another please listen to me. I said I wasn't in agreement of that.
But then,
I was not in agreement.
Why was that proper?
But maybe I should take it back.
I speak on behalf of the Commonwealth, the largest concentration of people in the world.
Yes.
And I am not going to have, not me, the Commonwealth disrespected by the threat to take away the verification of the Commonwealth. I will speak to the Commonwealth. I'm going for it. I'm going to speak to the Commonwealth Secretary General shortly. She's willing to speak to me. And I have a duty to her to report accurately. Absolutely. And if you cannot know, avoid speaking accurately.
Absolutely. I agree.
So that if you avoid things, because I'm saying no. Hello. Maybe kick it away, but kick it back. Hello. Because good people have done within this day. And if I will not take it.
All right, thank you. I'm coming out. Thank you.
Karen Cummings came and met with the foreign observers, threatened to take away their, their accreditation as observers, which is a breach of protocol. She convened a meeting inside of the Elections Commission polling or counting station, which is a breach of protocol. It has not been authorized by the Guyana Elections Commission for what I'd say a non-acting minister at this point, because we know that cabinet will have been dissolved with the dissolution of parliament and all these things since the electoral process begun, so she has no capacity to come and execute that mandate at this point. And what they have committed, actually what they did in there is that they started to pack the SOPs in certain spots, which we view as a clear threat to the integrity of the polls. Further, they have also communicated that there is a bomb threat in the building. I'm curious to know where that bomb threat originated from, since the birth given to this structure, since the polls got here, has been quite far. If that is indeed true.
We have received a report of a bomb threat, and I just announced it in there. Who want to stay there, staying on their own risk. I'm out the building. It is left to a GCOM to activate their plan.
They got so desperate, they called in a bomb scare. But nobody moved, including the ambassadors and the foreign representatives, because they know what's going on. Mr. Lowenfield has failed on every single promise he made, and we believe it's part of a pattern. And rather than sit upstairs, the chair has to come down now and sort this out. This is an embarrassment to our country.
The delay, this process is some kind of thing they're coming up with to try to rig this election.
Everybody is waiting here, all the international observers, everyone, waiting for the verification to continue for Region 4. I just spoke with the Commonwealth Secretary General prior to that. She said no declaration has been made, so nobody should be claiming victory. And then suddenly Mr. Mingo came in and said he's going to make a declaration. They're not going to succeed, because once they do, the whole international Guyana will be sanctioned, all of them personally. We will seek personal sanctions against every single official who tried to tamper with the results of the election, including the bunch of thugs that came in here just now. This is a stealing of the election in the presence of the international community. So now the world is seeing this, the stealing of the elections, and the diplomats are right here now. And I'm sure they're in touch with their government.
We saw more APNU representatives, members of parliament, ministers entering the room. So you had more police presence arrive. Then you had Mr. Camarade Ramjatan arrive, and I'll never forget it. He was wearing a yellow shirt and a black suit. He came in arms flaring, went upstairs, up the escalator, spent all of 7 minutes, came back downstairs, and left. But other representatives did come, Nicolette Henry and others did come into the room. And then Mr. Mingo came out on the balcony and attempted, I suppose, to read another declaration. We couldn't hear because there was so much loud objection to it. And the building was just filled with noise. We couldn't hear what he was saying, but we did see him reading a paper.
I went home, called a judge, and asked him if he would hear an urgent application on my behalf orally. The judge was reluctant. I persuaded him, point out the law to him, all on the telephone, that this thing is possible. The law provides for it. I don't have the time to come to you with a written application, as is the norm. But I can give you an undertaking, as the law provides, that within reasonable time, the oral application I make will be reduced into writing and present to you for filing. After some arguments, he agreed to hear me. And I went to the court and I made the application. He asked me to walk with me, an order of the court. By that time, I got a junior lawyer to come with me, and he typed out the order that I wanted from the court, a draft order. I presented the oral arguments, and the judge granted the oral order. The order in writing, because I can't go and serve an oral order. I had to get that order. And that was the order, in the name of Riaz Holadar, that stopped Mingo from... By that time, Mingo had already made a declaration, though he did not complete the tabulation. He aborted the tabulation, though he was tabulating with that fraudulent document, that spreadsheet. As the pressure grew, he aborted that process, ran upstairs to the top of the building, and declared the results.
Not be in favor of the PVP. Mr. Mingo has decided he will not speak.
Instead of the verified statements of poll, where APNU got 114,000, they now have APNU at 136,458. So they added 22,000 to the APNU's column. And where the PPP was 80,000, now it's come down to 77,329. So that will give you a 59,000 or so, 50-something thousand difference. Exactly what we had a 52,000 lead. So this is the manufactured figure now that went out on the statement of the statement of, not the declaration by Mingo. Fraudulent. You all have a copy of all the SOPs in Region 4. You can add it up, and therefore the observers have this too. So now that they've seen it, they were waiting on this. So now I expect that the observers would start speaking. But this is totally fake, a fraudulent declaration by 22,000 votes added out of nowhere. Not verified, never voted for them, but they add 22,000 votes more to themselves in Region 4.
Today, the transparent verification of the results from District 4 was stopped. And the fact that there was no transparency about the results that were ultimately announced today means that those results lack credibility. We don't know, and no one else can verify that the results that were announced are the correct results or not. We just don't know. And we don't know because there was no transparency in the process for announcing those results. We saw that there was an agreed upon procedure where the parties were able to verify the statements of poll, and then that procedure was ended, and these results therefore came as a result of a process that we can't identify.
All of the other political parties also were present when this was going on, where they did not verify the tabulation of the results. We just want to see that the results have been verified.
I think I even cry on that day because it's like it brings back memories of what those people have been through during that time when there was no technology, when there were no international bodies with us witnessing these events. So could imagine what they have gone through at that point of time, knowing that there was no one there for them. And now that you have everybody and you're doing it clear out there, you know, and just imagine if we were not there, what would have happened?
The rigging that took place in the 2020 elections was not in the polling stations. The rigging was going to be based upon the evidences before us in the nerve of GCOM, in the secretariat of GCOM, by the high officials of GCOM. And that was unimaginable and unbelievable.
We saw some medics come in. They went up with oxygen upstairs, and then they were denied entry by the police. So we sought to find out what's going on. Then Inspector Narayan came, and he said that Claudette is like his mother, and she called him and said she's feeling unwell. So apparently he called the medics to go into the room to come and see her, but they were prevented. So he tried to go up to see her. The police were preventing it. They removed the handles from the woman's door and kept her hostage there so that they can, Roxanne Myers and the others, Roxanne Myers and the others, Roxanne Myers and the others could come down stage and stage a coup d'etat.
And at some point in that evening, the then commander of the A Division, Assistant Commissioner Edgar Thomas, came into the building. I don't recall whether I engaged him or he engaged me right away. But at some point in time, Roxanne Myers and Joseph Eastman, who is the chief accountant of at the Guyana Elections Commission, came and they spoke to the police. A rank that was junior to Commander Thomas, stationed in the Tactical Services Unit, came in and instructed that everyone leaves. And in a very haughty and rude manner also. At that point, I don't believe that my safety was guaranteed anymore. And as I left them in that building, as I was walking out of that entrance of the Ashman's building, or the exit, whichever one you want to call it, there were heavily armed ranks of the Tactical Services Unit, dressed in battle gear, proceeding into the building in formation. I don't think that I could have left or retreated more hastily than I did. That was the last that we ever saw of those documents. Public records have revealed that the persons who I left behind were forcefully ejected from that Ashman's building at that time.
I can say that there are some parts of the police force that would have acted honorably, and there were some parts that definitely would have participated fully in subverting the will of the people. And taking the instructions from persons like Roxanne Myers when we were forced out of that building.
We removed us from here.
All those SOB left, we are unattended without locking, right? It's supposed to be a the place in lock, right?
I mean, people were sitting on chairs and they were threatened to lift the chairs and take them outside, such as Sis Conrad and so on. So persons were threatened. At that time, it was beyond frustration. It was beyond frustration because we had already gone through so much.
At that point, it became even more grim. The situation looked even more grim because we knew now that once we have lost sight or once we lost possession of the statements of poll, then it means that the election results, the integrity has now been tampered with.
The area where the SOPs were, it was in a garbage bag because for them it was garbage. They had no intentions of ever using them, and we know that. That's why they were just, thrown in a corner. But for me at least, it was a little comfort that, okay, they're here. I'm not sure if they're going to be there after, but at least we would have proof that, they were actually here. So if anyone would say, well, the SOPs weren't here or what's not, at least we had something to back up our claim.
The Chief Justice of Guyana ruled yesterday, and her ruling was absolutely clear that she expects the returning officer to either start anew or complete the process with respect to the SOPs. And we hope and pray that there will be an adherence to not just the law of the judgment, but to the spirit of the judgment, because she was very clear in the last few paragraphs of her judgment as to what she expected in terms of the spirit and the principled position and the transparent process that is critical if this country is to go forward.
The court would have given some specific orders yesterday, and part of those orders that the court would have given yesterday was for the process of verification to recommence,
before 11 a.m. this morning, and for the SOPs to be used as was contemplated by the law. So we turned up here this morning, a number of the parties and observers, and the police would have communicated to us that we cannot proceed further, that we are not allowed in. I inquired from the police where did this instruction come from, whether it's from GCOM. He said this came from their superior. I inquired from the officer again whether he could communicate with his staff, whether there are staff inside the building. He said yes, there are a few staff. I asked whether he can communicate with the staff that we're out here waiting to fulfill our responsibility, and also the court order. He communicated to me that he cannot do this, that is outside of his realm.
We asked that one person from each delegation also enter, and they'll also be briefed by the returning officer. We hope that we can start 10 sharp and get this at 11 o'clock sharp. 11 sharp, so we can move it. So if one person from the party, each party that is resident here, could identify themselves, I'll take them into the returning officer, and we can move forward.
We asked for an opening balance that would show how many votes were cast for each parties. This was not provided for. Then they decided with the intervention, or should I say the pronouncement from the APNU representative, that they start from the beginning. When this process started, Mingo's assistant read off from her purported statement of poll. And in every instance, it was at variance with the statement of polls held by the different political parties. And the singular variance was for the APNU votes, which were doubled or tripled, but inflated significantly. So what you have here is an open hijack of the election process, an open attempt to destroy and denigrate our fledgling democracy. Representative of Change Guyana, we thought that this is a open theft, open stealing, open cheating.
You have to show the statement of poll to say this is where the number came from. He never showed that.
Mingo was in that court. The Chief Justice made him stand up and explain to him, using various examples with her hands, how to hold up the statements of poll, whether he wants to project it on a screen. But whatever he did, it must be the statements of poll that form the basis of the tabulation. Yet that gentleman went back into Splashman Building and continued to refuse to use that statements of poll as the basis. I had to leave the court, run over there again, point out to him, you just left the Chief Justice and you are violating our order, and I'm going to jail you for contempt. Then is when he aborted the process and says that he will resume at GCOM headquarters. It was Friday the 13th.
GCOM has been given in excess of $8 billion to run an election, and that is what we are being subjected to. A piece of sheet and an old sheet and some cardboard. That is the screen. But nevertheless, we persevere. We are told we're not allowed to ask questions, we're not allowed to use cell phones, we are not allowed to take pictures of what was transpiring. and nothing. It's as though you must be sitting there as though you are robots and going through this process. We were not, importantly, were not allowed to verify the authenticity of those statements of poll by at least checking.
That night, Mingo made his second, now infamous declaration. But even after that, I realized, well, we're just going to have to go back to court. And that's what we did, because we have to ensure that the rule of law is upheld. He had blatantly, he's not, at this point, not only blatantly trying to declare fraudulent results, he's also defying the ruling of the Chief Justice. So multiple illegalities were ongoing and unfolding.
Following the two fraudulent declarations with the deliberate intent to prevent the correct results from being declared, uncertainty grew as to what the final outcome would be. Similarly, many became fearful that if the APNU+AFC attempts to rig the elections were successful, dictatorship would return. In many ways, that fear seemed motivation for citizens to stand up and safeguard democracy in spite of any possible consequence. The international community that witnessed the trampling of constitutional processes stood with the Guyanese people in defense of their freedoms.
We never asked the international community, not one day, to pick a side. All we asked them to do is stand up with us for respect for the rule of law, compliance with the Constitution, fair and free elections, and democracy. That's all. And the people who are angry with the international community are the people who were trying to derail the elections, who were trying to break the rule of law, who were trying to be disobedient to the Constitution. All the international community did is demanded compliance to the rule of law, obedience to the Constitution, fair and free elections, respect of democracy.
You had the first court challenge, and if I'm not mistaken, it was Yulita Moore being hatched. Served on the commission about 1 or 2 o'clock the afternoon of that Tuesday, thereby scuttling the process. COVID became a real factor, a real challenge to be dealt with. At that time, we were not wearing masks because it had not yet hit. Those precautions were not yet necessary. The CARICOM team left.
That team that came in on late Saturday night into early Sunday morning left Guyana. I watched as that plane, as they boarded the plane, and I watched as that plane departed Guyana tonight. And I watched it with a heavy heart. I cannot imagine that an arrangement made, an initiative that started by President Granger to give legitimacy to these elections and the election results. I cannot imagine. And to quote the Barbados Prime Minister, the chairman of CARICOM, that there are forces in Guyana that are hell-bent on preventing the legitimate and transparent counting of the ballots.
At some point, you just knew that you had to have this recount. It's the only way to get a true reflection. Because
we were beginning to believe that the rigging mechanisms in place was never going to go away.
With every other thing associated with the coalition, you can't take their word at face value anymore.
We were very optimistic and very happy with that because the LJP had submitted to Mr. Mingo letter requesting recounts, and all of those were refused.
They did a whole host of things designed to stall, to undermine the process, making wild, reckless allegations about dead people voting, migrant people voting, etc.
As our T-shirts tell you, we are guardians of democracy, and this is how we see ourselves.
What I expect to gain from out here, and Guyana as a whole, and even the international community that gave us so much attention and concern to make sure we have credible and transparent elections in this country, right? My hope is to see that the truth is revealed.
As guardians of democracy, our monitoring was operationalized, not just in terms of guarding the containers that were physically on site, but we have people patrolling with the police to ensure where they are taken. And as you would see, a group here outside of the Ottertown Convention Center. We have others who are at the Kingston location to ensure that the chain of command for the containers to ensure the integrity of those ballot boxes are in sight.
As a concerned Guyanese and many other concerned Guyanese that is out here on a daily basis, we are here to just keep an eye on those containers that you see across there, that the ballot box are in and our voters inside. We know the armed forces are keeping a look on it, but as GCOM and as you know, the way this system is running there, you cannot trust no one. So we are just being concerned that our voters, the last string of hope is in those containers. Our future, the future of Guyana is in those containers.
The results were eventually tabulated, and they confirmed that the PPP won the elections in accordance with the statements of poll that the PPP had made public.
The PPP had won the general and regional elections in 2020 in Guyana. At that point in time, it obviously was evident that the APNU+AFC, in collaboration with Mingo and other GCOM representatives, including Mr. Lowenfield and Ms. Myers, attempted to rig the general and regional 2020 elections here in Guyana.
So they got Lowenfield, who is required under the law, to tabulate the results. Lowenfield did so, and tabulated the results accurately and presented it to the commission at the last meeting. However, Lowenfield proceeded to do something else. Lowenfield converted himself into a court, heard all what he calls the allegations. He found them to have been proven, and he acted upon them by adjusting the total votes received by the PPP at least, adjusting it by tens of thousands, deducting those votes from the PPP, and therefore has a bundle of documents that show that APNU won the elections. The chairperson at the last meeting had to make certain pronouncements, and the pronouncements were to the effect that GCOM has no authority to hear and determine allegations that concern or touch the credibility of elections. That allegations of phantom and dead people voting have to be dealt with by an elections petition and heard by the High Court.
The U.S. is certainly watching this unfold, and we are watching it carefully, both here locally and back in Washington. You've seen and commented on our statements locally, which we stand behind. And then Washington has also made some pretty tough comments, and the Secretary of State has said that there will be serious consequences if the rule of law is not adhered to.
Today I'm announcing visa restrictions on individuals responsible for or complicit in undermining democracy in Guyana. Immediate family members of such persons may also be subject to restrictions. The Granger government must respect the results of democratic elections and step aside.
Today, it is about celebrating democracy. And in doing so, I cannot leave this podium without thanking our international partners, our regional partners, all the other political parties and members of the Guyanese community who committed themselves and cemented their work in service to the country and in protection of our democracy. I thank you sincerely for your efforts, and I assure you that Guyana is better because of your efforts.
This has been a long fight, a fight that was necessary, but it didn't have to be this way. We could have had a transition to a new government based on the results of the elections 5 months ago and create an atmosphere that would have been conducive to working together, because that was our intention.
Finally, to reach the end of this very long roller coaster road we've been on. And I think when history is written, this whole period will take a very special place. Not just for us who've been the winning party and President Irfan Ali, but for our country, for showing that we were a people, that all people, all Guyanese, in various ways were defending democracy and standing up for democracy, and democracy prevailed in the end.
Since the no confidence motion right on, going back to the election, post-elections, all the actions of the APNU+AFC were there to rig the election, to derail the democratic process. And I think all the plans that they had were foiled by us and the other democratic forces in this country. And that is why we had a change of government. All the international agencies, all the international observers, the embassies, and those persons who came into the country, they saw what they did.
Those who inflicted such pain and misery that tarnished our reputation as a people and as a country will always be remembered for their glaring raid on our freedoms and democratic processes. Confidence has been restored. Our image has been repaired. It shows that our freedoms must never be taken for granted.
Long live the government of Guyana as they